So here we are. What are you doing here? You know, what is it that brought you here? How is it that you came to be here? It's not any kind of normal thing, I think, to be here. It's really not. Yeah. You think about it, most of the people in the world are not here. Truly, you know. So, you know, what is it that brings us to these passes, or through these passes in life? You know, by being here, you folks are, for your own reasons, taking steps beyond what most people do, even those who find their way to NLP. You know, most people are content with practitioner training. They are content with, you know, acquiring those intervention skills and patterns and techniques, and they go, good, okay, I got that. Now I'll go on to something else. But you folks have not done that. You have decided by being here to go deeper into this world of NLP. So I don't know what brought each one of you, like what particular thing made each one of you want to be here in this room. But I'll tell you what brought me here. A disaster. I was subject to a absolute disaster as a child. I don't know if you ever had a disaster as a child, but I did. When I was in 7th grade. You know, life was fine when I was in 7th grade. I was one of those kids who just tried to get by. I just did just as much as I needed to get by, you know, getting passing grades, C's, that was fine with me. And the rest of the time I was out with my friends making plans how to beat up the bullies and stuff, you know, and devise instruments of torture to kill and maim them. Mario and I once designed in great detail a toilet for a bully with these razor-sharp claws that would come up from underneath the toilet and grab them by the butt and pull them in. So that's how I spent much of my time at that age, not on schoolwork. And that was fine. I was content. I was content. One day I'm sitting in class, just like we are, in science, and the teacher made an electrifying announcement and said, hey, I've got something to tell you. We're going to have a science fair. And everybody in class has to produce a project, a science project for the science fair. And of course, there was general groaning throughout the class. Oh, now we have to work. And then it got worse because then he said, and by the way, half of your grade for the semester will depend on this. And the groaning stopped because nobody was breathing. And you have to breathe to be able to groan. And we were just, everybody except one kid in class. That was not me. And I was sitting there thinking like the other 29 kids, oh God, what am I going to do for a project? I don't want to do this. And then the teacher said, by the way, if you would like a suggestion for a project, I have a book up here on my desk that lists science projects for science fairs. And you can look at it at the end of class. Whoa! That was great. Every one of us was waiting for the bell to ring, except for that one kid. And as soon as the bell rang, 29 kids jumped up and ran to the desk and are just fighting for that book, and I was right there with them. One kid didn't. His name was Jim. He just walked right out the door. Jim was that kid in class that you hated because he was so smart, you know. He could do everything. He got straight A's, and he typed. You know, when I was a kid, nobody typed. Nobody typed. Even adults didn't type then. But he typed. And he was brilliant, and so we hated him. And he walked out the door, but the rest of us are fighting over this book, looking desperately for some project, you know, that we could use to save our butts in class. And I found my project. Now, this book was the best book you ever saw. Because when you look through this book, not only did it have, 200 projects in there, but for every science project, it described exactly how to set up the experiment, where to get all your materials, how to run the experiment, described what the results would be, how to write up your results, how to create a display to display them properly. It was everything. Anwar was like, it was a gift from heaven. So it was just a fabulous book. And I found my project in there. And my project, the one I said, this is something I can handle, was on regeneration in planaria. Now, I don't know if you know what planaria are. Most people don't. Well, no. Planaria, but they're related to them. But they're also called flatworms. Yeah, flatworms. And planaria, they're these little blobs, these little black blobs. They're only about that long. But when you look at them up close, they look like this. They got these two eye spots here. And then they got a feeding tube right there. And what they do is these little guys, they swim around in the water looking for dead things. With their little tube stuck in there, like that. See? And they go around and they find something. And they go, ooh, I can eat that. And then they pull out their tube and they stick it on there and they start sucking them up, see? Until they're all filled, and then they stick their tube back in and then they go away and digest. That's the life of a planarian. But here's what's great about a planarian. You can take these little suckers and you can whack them in half. You can take a razor blade and cut them in half. And the back will grow a front and the front will grow a back. Is that great? And then you could take a razor blade, you can split their heads down the middle. And you'll end up with a planarian with two heads. How about that? Isn't that great? Somewhere in there. You can split their tails, and you end up with a planarian with two tails. You can split their heads again and end up with a planarian with four heads. You can cut them on the diagonal, and then you end up with a planarian that grows off at an angle like this, see? This is a good animal. You can cut this sucker up any way you want, and he just grows back. This is something I can handle as a scientific exploration. I can do this, So it said right in there, this is how you run this experiment. This is where you get them. I sent away from my planaria. And since I already knew what was going to happen, I started creating my display, writing up my results, And after a week or so, I got in the mail in a box, a little jar, and in the jar were my planaria. And very excited, I dumped my planaria out in a bowl and threw in some raw liver and watched them, swim around until they converged on the raw liver, and they all came out with all their little, feeding tubes, and they went, and it was pretty exciting. So after a couple of days of, playing with my planaria, I decided it's time to get down to science. So I started taking them out, and I got out my razor blade, and I started slitting heads and tails and cutting them in half and so on. Put them back in the bowl, wait for my science project to grow. Well, everything was fine for a week. One morning, however, I got up and I looked in the bowl, and my planaria had been growing. And I looked in the bowl, and this is just like the Saturday before the project was due, and my planaria were gone. My project was gone. I looked and looked in that bowl, and there was nothing in there. It was just water. And then I noticed that on the surface of the water there was something floating, some scum. And then I realized what that scum was. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door of my experience, and I knew. Come on in. Were you at the wrong place?
We were.
You are definitely in the right place now.
We are. It feels like.
We were just talking about scum.
Oh.
And you've missed most of the scum discussion, but it doesn't get better than that. So here I'm looking in this bowl, right? And my, what's floating on the surface is my planaria. They've disintegrated it in the middle of the night, and so is my grade. Because of course I've got no time to get more planaria, cut them up, let them grow. I can't present a bowl of scum. And I was absolutely distraught. I thought, I'm going to get an F. There goes my grade in science. What am I going to do about this? So being a normal human being, I spent all morning stomping up and down the house, bewailing my fate, and why me? Why does this have to happen to me? And feeling pretty sorry for myself. And I was enjoying that pretty well. And I thought, maybe to make myself feel better, I'll go in and look at my baby sister sleeping. I had a brand new baby sister. And I used to like to watch her sleeping in a crib. So I walked into the little room that we kept her in. And I walked in the room, and in the room it was dark, so she could sleep. Except that there was a little red light on the little dresser. There was a little red light. And next to the red light was a little 1-gallon aquarium with a goldfish in it. So I walked into the room, and I looked at my little sister sleeping. And I did feel better. And on my way out of the room, I looked at that goldfish, and I just waved at it like that. And that goldfish went absolutely berserk. It started swimming back and forth through the tank like this. And I was quite surprised. And once he settled down, I waved again, and bam, that goldfish took off. But that's pretty weird. A little while later, I went out, and my sister woke up, and I came in with my mother, and we walked in, we turned on the light, the overhead light. And I said, Mom, watch this. And went up to the goldfish, and I went like that. And the fish did this. No response whatsoever. And so I started waving at it, did nothing. I got pretty annoyed. So my mother said, well, what's happening here? I don't see anything. So I started tapping on the glass, Fish didn't care. I thrust my hand into the tank, into the water, and started poking that fish, He didn't mind a bit. He just sat there. And I thought, what's going on here? I realized something was different. The white light was on. So I turned off the white light and turned on the red light, went up to the red fish, to the fish, and I waved my hand in front of the tank. And boom, that fish just took off. Crazy. And I thought, okay, I got a science experiment. You bet. I went into the hardware store, and I got a red bulb and a blue bulb and a yellow bulb and a green bulb. I went to the pet store, and I got a bunch of goldfish and a bunch of little bowls. Remember those little round bowls you get them in, that you bring them home in to die in? So I got a whole bunch of those, and I sat in the bathroom, in the dark in the bathroom under these different colored lights for the rest of the weekend, testing what I called hyperactivity in goldfish. And I kept charts of how their hyperactivity changed under these different colored lights over time. And I finally finished Sunday night. I threw together a display. I just put up a board with my charts on there, and I put in front of it that little tank with my best goldfish, my best responder, and a red light, which turned out to be the best light, and a switch so people could turn it on and make the fish go crazy. Took it to school, and thank God that I wasn't going to fail science. All right. That night was the science fair. Now, this science fair it was one of these big deals. They had the auditorium filled with projects from all these kids. And it was filled with parents and teachers, and they invited this crew of local scientists to come and judge the science fair. And kind of sitting in the middle of this whole science fair was Jim's project. You remember Jim? Oh, yeah, Jim's project, his was on DNA. Now, we all know about DNA now. But when I was in 7th grade, nobody knew about DNA except Jim. And Jim had this fantastic display with this beautiful, double helix molecule hanging in there with all these colored balls that he bought from some supply house. And plastered behind it, he had 50 typewritten pages on DNA. It was mighty impressive, and everybody knew Jim was going to win. Well, I don't know if you've ever been to a science fair, but it's pretty fun, people growing radishes upside down and torturing chickens with different kinds of feed and making listening ears, so they could hear whispering across the room. And somebody actually did a planarian experiment, only their planaria didn't die, and they had a 2-headed planarian. And so it was pretty fun. Well, finally, at the end of the evening, it was time for the judges to announce their selections, the winners. And when they announced who was the winner was, of course, me. And you knew that, because otherwise I wouldn't be telling you this story if I hadn't won the science fair. I did win the science fair. Jim came in 2nd place. The planarian guy, he came in 3rd. So here was the part, though, that really grabbed me, though. I mean, I was thrilled about winning. But what grabbed me was I'm standing there with the judges, and a reporter asked the judges, why did you pick this project as the winning project? And they answered, well, it was the only example of original research in the whole science fair. That went right in. Original, good. Copy, bad. Do something new and different. That's good. Do what everybody else does. That's bad. And that just went right. And of course, at the time, I didn't know that. I mean, at the time, I didn't have that consciousness. But that is what happened at that point. Suddenly I was off on this new exploration of, what's new, different, original. So now we fast forward to college, where I was an unhappy psychology student. And I met this skinny guy in a bank. His name was Richard Bandler. Huh? No. When I first met Richard, he and I traded clothes. That was a long time ago. And I started talking with Richard, and he said, "Oh, I'm doing this. I'm starting this Gestalt therapy group tonight. If you want to come, why don't you come?" I said, "Okay, I'll come." So what happened that evening was, I've been through 3.5 years of psychology, but there I discovered that here was somebody who was doing something that was different than what anybody else was doing. And so, of course, boom, I was grabbed right away. I had to stay. And there was something else that I realized that he was doing besides being different. And that was that he was going after what is the structure that's operating behind this person's experience. Rather than just trying to change their experience, what he was actually addressing and going for, what's the structure behind it that's giving rise to that experience. And this is something I realized that I had been looking for ever since I had tortured that poor little goldfish with that red light, which is that I realized that somehow in working with that red light and that goldfish, I was getting in touch with or getting connected with a little bit of this relationship between the structure of experience and what are the experiences that things and people have. In this case, it was a fish, but in the case of when I was working with Richard in these early groups, it was people's experience. So what that formed into or became was NLP. Those early groups were all Gestalt groups that Richard was running. And then John was in another group, Gestalt group. He and Richard got together, put their heads together, and started developing the meta model. And there was this core group of us, including me and Judy Delogier and Robert and some other people, Leslie, Cameron Bandler, who started working with them to explore experience. But what we were exploring it through was structure. Now, I see that you've got on the walls here, you've got all of these NLP presuppositions and ideas. Yeah, it's not there. The most important one is not there. So, I know you guys, map's not the territory and blah, 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 blah. Okay, true. However, the most fundamental presupposition, the one upon which all of NLP is based, and without it there is no NLP, is that experience has structure. And has an A in it. Has structure. That's the most fundamental, important presupposition in NLP. So, what we were doing in those days is exploring the structure of experience. And all those things that now are known as NLP, the techniques and so on, that all came out of exploring the structure of experience. How did we do that? We did that through this process we call modeling. Basically what we did was we found people who did interesting things. All those things that are NLP today, they weren't just like made up out of thin air. Maybe a couple things were, but mostly it was not made up out of thin air. It came from people like you. We'd have somebody, for instance, that good old workhorse change history, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, that came from a woman who came to one of our groups. See, we would meet once or twice a week up at Richard's house, and we'd bring people that we found on the street or friends, and we'd come in and experiment with one another. And what we would do is we would look for people who had interesting problems or could do interesting things. And at one point there was a woman who came in and said, "Oh yeah, I used to have this problem, but then I just went back and changed my history, and now I don't have it anymore." And so we go, "Oh, really? How did you do that?" And so what we did was we modeled her. That is, we found out what was the structure of her experience. What structure did she use to organize her world that made it possible for her to change her history, as she described it. And then we codified it into that technique. Well, most of what NLP is came about in just that way. That is, through people's experiences that we recognized as being somehow useful, that could be useful to somebody else. So what we're going to do these 3 days is we are going to go into the land of modeling. That's the level at which you are at now. Before in Practitioner, you're told, this is the way to do these things, now do these things. But we're going beyond that here for these 3 days and for the rest of this Master Practitioner training. That is that we're going not into the land of technique. but we're going into the land of learning how to think differently, how to organize our thinking and our experience in ways that support recognizing structure and systems, process in people's experience. That's what we're here to do. That's the main thing we're here to do. It's because it's from that thinking and from that organizing of thinking that springs, all of not only what NLP is, but what there still is to discover. If we don't have that orientation, then all we get to keep doing is repeating what's been done. But what I want for all of us is to develop a way to perceive experience that takes us to structure, recognizing and perceiving structure. Okay? All right. Now and I just want to say that what we're engaged in here, although I'll be up in front of you most of the time, it's not a lecture. It's a conversation. We are going to have a 3-day conversation here. We'll be doing lots of things with each other. But by conversation, what I mean is that I want you to participate in understanding and figuring out what it is we're talking about when we talk about the will to model, what it means to do that and how to do it. So when you have questions, when there's things that you don't understand, things you want made more explicit, I want you to ask them, because there are probably ones that other people will have as well. Okay? So, what is modeling? I have an answer to that. This is my answer. This is an answer to it. And I think the simplest way to capture it or to describe modeling is that modeling is the process of creating useful maps of human abilities. All right, now we'll talk about different words in this definition as we go through the morning, but just as a preview, I want to just point out a few of the words that to me are important. One is that in modeling, you are creating maps. And I think it's important that you recognize that in modeling, you are not identifying or specifying the truth of an experience. You're not exhausting somebody's experience, or you're not getting to the very bottom of their experience. That a model is a description of experience. It's a description of an ability. And that what we're after in making this description or making this map is that it be a useful one, that is one that allows, a map that allows somebody else to reproduce or manifest that same ability that the exemplar, that is the person who has the ability, has. And that to me is what we're after here. Yeah. I'm sorry, what's your name?
I'm Diane.
Diane.
Thank you. From my experience with this work, especially with the work of Robert Jones,
Yeah.
I might add to that human abilities and ways of being.
Well,
As a possibility.
okay, so so Diane is suggesting that she might add to human abilities and ways of being, yeah, as a way to expand the range of what's being modeling is being applied to.
Actually, even the way people operate, like when I look at work transformation, it's more about qualities and values and ways of being different than abilities. I can speak louder with that.
Thank goodness for cutting and transitions, huh? Fade in, fade out. We're back. Okay, so I take your point. Now, one of the things you're going to find out from working with me over these 3 days is that one of the things that drives me is going for the essence. I'm a samurai modeler. I'm always going for cutting away anything that's unnecessary. I'm not saying you should do that. I'm warning you that that's what I will do, okay? Just so you understand. Some folks, Robert Dilts is not a samurai modeler. He's an inclusive model. You know, let's put in more stuff. Let's get rid of as much as possible. So I have no objection to your adding that to this, as long as you do it privately. Not on my board. But I would simply say that human abilities encompasses everything that people do. Some people have the ability to be a certain way. Some people have an ability to be tranquil. To me, that is just as much an ability as the ability to learn a language easily, or the ability to pick winning horses in a race or anything like that. So to me, states are also abilities. Some people have the ability to attain or maintain certain states. Other people don't have that ability. Okay?
So that's more all-inclusive than the way one would normally think about ability.
Right. And I'm glad you asked that, because I want to make sure that we have that inclusiveness here. Because to me, this does cover everything that human beings do. I mean, frankly, if this were just up to me, and I was only pleasing myself, I would say creating useful maps of human experience. But most people don't like that, because for a lot of people, they have difficulty including abilities within experience, and I don't. So most of us are focused on abilities. That's fine. I'm perfectly fine with that. So this is what we're after, these 3 days, is learning the kind of thinking that supports or helps make it possible for us to engage in this process of creating useful maps of human abilities. That's what we're after here. Okay? All right. So any questions about that before we move on? All right. Now, why bother? Because I'm going to tell you, this is going to be work. This is not easy. This is work. And by the way, at the end of these 3 days, you aren't going to be done. I've been doing this for more or less almost 30 years. It's called 29 years. And, I'm still learning. And I hope that always is the case. So it's not the case that by the end of these 3 days you go, okay, I've got that. It's not like learning a technique. Okay? It's a way of orienting your experience. So why bother? Let me give you an example of why bother. Sorry, I should have brought this out earlier, but I forgot. This is very weird, having a camera on me when I do this, and being concerned about time. Marvelous. Marvelous. So, okay. Now, in one of my seminars, oh, thank goodness. In one of my, I'll bet that sounded terrible, huh? Okay. So, why bother? To learn to model, go to the trouble to learn to model. One of the seminars I did a few years ago, there was a woman in there named Janet Pesner, who works with children who are dyslexic. And one of the things that she found with these children was that they come in believing that they don't have the ability to learn or to change. So the first thing she would do with them, is to give them an experience of the fact that they can learn and change. So they're starting from that position. And what she would do is she'd show them a photograph or a picture of some kind, call it a photograph, give them a piece of paper and a pencil, and give them, I think it was 5 minutes to draw what they saw in the picture. Okay? So, for instance, one of them, Andy here, drew this picture of a stove. Yeah? Pretty good. I would be proud to have drawn that. So then what she did was she had them set aside that picture. And then she took about 5 or 10 minutes to teach them how to look. And what she did was she'd taken a model for how to look at something to draw it from the work of a woman named Betty Edwards. I don't know if you're familiar with Betty Edwards. She wrote a wonderful book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. And what happened with Betty Edwards was, it's a fabulous example of modeling. She had been teaching drawing for many years. She'd have students who come in, she'd show them how to draw. Some could, some couldn't. And then she would get annoyed with the ones who couldn't and say, well, look, just do it like this. And they'd say, well, I am doing it like that, and it looks terrible. She couldn't figure out why some could draw and some couldn't. So what she decided to do was to start asking questions. She started asking questions of those who could draw well and find out, well, what's going on and what are you thinking about? What are you seeing when you are drawing? And asking those same kinds of questions of those who couldn't draw. And she discovered that there were certain patterns, certain structures of experience and perception that were operating in those who could draw compared to those who couldn't. And from that, she created a whole way of teaching drawing that's in that book that makes it possible for people to learn to draw. So Janet just took the bare bones of this model. And here she takes these children, and in 5 or 10 minutes, she takes them through this process, this model of learning how to draw. And then she gives the child another piece of paper and has them draw the same picture again. And for here, Andy, here is the difference it made for him. So here is about 10 or 15 minutes later, here's the difference. Staggering, eh? Oh, but wait, there's more. These kids were, I think they were like, if I remember, like 8 in that range. So here was Eric's. That's a glass of lemonade. Okay, before. That's before. Yeah. There's after. Quite a difference, huh? 10, 15 minutes later? Yeah. And here, this was, I forgot his name, it's not on there. This was, he drew a frog. I guarantee you that's a frog. I know you wouldn't know it otherwise. It looks like one has been stepped on, or one that I worked on. That's a frog, okay? He did this on the same piece of paper. This is the same kid drawing a frog 15 minutes later. Is that staggering? Yeah. Yeah, it's absolutely staggering. Now, that's an example of the difference having a model can make. That's why bother. Why bother is because what having a model does is it organizes the structure of your experience to support or to succeed at manifesting a particular ability. Now, could this young man have learned to draw a frog like this in time eventually? Could have, with enough practice and luck, experimenting, figuring out what works, what doesn't work, maybe getting some good ideas from things people would say or do. Perhaps in time he would be able to do that. But that in time, first of all, could be 10, 15, 20, or 30 years, and it also could be never. What having a model does is it very quickly organizes the structure of your experience to be able to, effectively manifest an ability or effectively operate in a particular context. That's the advantage of having a model. All right? So a little more explicitly, and then we'll take a break. To me, there's kind of three realms for answering the question to why bother. One is the one we've just been talking about. You don't have to write that down. But this you do. There's a practical reason to learn to model, which is through modeling, we can correct problems and we can add abilities. Through modeling, as the example of change history was and is, that's an example of using modeling to correct problems. We can add abilities, which this example of drawing is one. There's also, to me, an evolutionary reason for bothering to learn to model, which is that in learning to model, because it's not a technique, it's a different way of thinking about experience and perceiving the world, it will result in you perceiving structure. That is, as you move through the world and move through your lives, you will recognize structure in it, as well as systems. Systems and structure go together. There's no way you're going to do modeling without also coming to recognize systems, because all of these things that are operating somebody's experience, they're like little marbles that are stuck in different places. They're all living aspects of their experience that are interacting with each other together as a system to manifest as an ability. And we're going to get lots of examples of that for these 3 days. We're going to just do that and do that and do that, because that's the most important thing. And finally, I think there's actually a spiritual reason to go into modeling. This is my indulgence. Which is that through modeling, that is through perceiving structure and systems, it opens you to the beauty of structure. That is, that you can start to have the experience of perceiving the structures that are operating in the world as being beautiful. And perhaps most importantly, come to appreciate how precious each person is. Because one of the other things that I think happens as a result of modeling is that you start to discover what's so wonderful about each person in the world. And they become just as precious as they really are to you. All right? So let's take a little break, and then we'll get to it. Is to explore the structure of experience that gives rise to human abilities and human experiences. So where are we going to find them? Where do we find them? Where do we find those abilities? In you, right here in this room. Right here in this room. Now, generally when people think of modeling, their minds tend towards thinking of those people who are on the cover of Time magazine or the New Economist, or those stellar folks who the media says they're so wonderful. But I find that the most important things to model, the most useful and meaningful things to model, you will find in rooms just like this, in the people who sit next to you. I'm all for making a lot of money and all that kind of stuff. I think that's fine. That's fine. However, that's not where the quality of our lives is really determined. one of the things that I do is I work as a coach for executives. I'm an executive coach. And so I get to talk with these, CEOs and CFOs. And, they've got more money than God, and they've got corner offices and all that kind of stuff. But when you talk with them as human beings, they go, I sure wish I could tell a joke and have somebody laugh. Or I wish I could play a musical instrument. Or I've never been able to go on a vacation and relax. Or I don't know how to entertain people in my home. Or, all of these little things. There's all these little things that actually make up the quality of our lives that are really worth modeling and worth making available to other people. So, when I think about, what to model, I just start looking around at the people who are right around me. So I know right now in this room, we could spend the next 20 years modeling just what's available in this room here in terms of experiences and ability. So what is here? What are you good at? Think about it. What are you good at? I'll tell you what I'm good at. Okay? Let's give you an idea of how to think about this. Yeah, shut. The model miming.
Sorry, I thought you meant the grapes.
So let me tell you what I'm good at. Some of the things I'm good at. I'm good at making people feel comfortable in my home. I'm good at that. It's one of the things you'll find, people who come and stay with me, they always remark, it's so easy to be, in your home with you, and they just love being in my home with me. I'm good at that. I'm good at editing things. If you give me something, you say, well, make this flow, make this work better, I can do that. I'm also good at planning how to build things. If you want something built, I'm talking about like a structure of any kind. I'm good at building things. I'm good at planning how to build things. So those are some of the things I'm good at. What are you good at? And that's not a rhetorical question. I'm going to sit here till I hear about it. Yeah, Diane, what are you good at?
I'm good at.
Oh, there it is.
I'm good at talking to my clients and finding out what they really need, not just what somebody told them they needed, and then providing that to them in a way that gives them not only what they wanted, but sometimes a little more.
Okay, now, good. So you got that as an ability. Some of us in here might want that ability. How many abilities did she just describe? Well, what ones did you hear, Anne?
One would be building rapport. There would be.
Did she say she was good at building rapport?
No.
No.
I'll turn it off.
Well, I changed it. Oh, okay, thanks. I'm presupposing. Okay, well, I'm presupposing that rapport would be essential.
Well, that's a mistake right there.
Okay.
All right. I have no idea if she's good at, if she has the ability to create rapport or not. She may or she may not.
Okay.
I don't have any experience of her, direct experience of her, and she didn't talk about it, so I really don't know. But what she did talk about being able to do is what?
She said she was good at finding out what people really needed.
What
and
they
wanted.
really needed.
Yeah.
There's an ability, okay? And then she said, and what was after that?
And I'm not sure of the exact words, helping them reach that.
Well, she said beyond that. Reach that and more than what they asked for.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So to me, that's two separate abilities. Now, the reason I want this is a good example for us to start out on, because I want to start tuning your ears and your intuitions for the descriptions that you get from people. It's very easy, to say to Diane, "What are you good at?" And she says, "Well, I'm good at finding out what people really want and then giving them more than they asked for and than they expected." Now, what happens if we start to try and model that as one chunk, as one piece? Well, we can, but I think it's more useful to recognize that those are two separate things, that you can find out what somebody really wants and then not be able to give it to them at all. In other words, that's a separate ability. There are other people who may not have the ability to find out what somebody really wants, but whatever it is they do want, they can give it to them, and maybe even more. Do you guys see what I mean? So one of the essential, we're starting now, we're into modeling already. One of the essential beginning places in modeling is to identify what it is you're modeling. And I cannot stress for you how important that is, to identify what it is you want to be able to do, what specifically you are modeling. If it's too big, if it's too broad, you will end up with just this complex mishmash of information that's very difficult to get your arms around and to make bring to life in your own experience. So one of the tasks that we have, part of the art of modeling, is deciding, okay, how do I want to chunk this? At what level do I want to chunk this person's ability so that it's appropriate? Let me give you the first question in modeling. First question you're going to always want to be asking and answering for yourself when you're thinking about modeling is, what do I want to be able to do? What do I want to be able to do? That's a great question. It's a much better question than what do I want? What do I want? Well, I want to have a lot of money. Who has a lot of money? Oh, you have a lot of money? I'm going to model you. How do you get a lot of money? How do you get a lot of money? That's different than asking, what do I want to be able to do? As soon as you start asking, going for the do part, it starts organizing or focusing your attention on behavior. Now, behavior for me isn't just what happens on the outside. Behavior can also be on the inside. You guys know about strategies, and we're going to talk about strategies tomorrow. Strategies are to be internal behavior. Those are the things you do on the inside. Things you do on the outside in your external behavior is also behavior. That's what you do on the outside. So you do things on the inside, you do things on the outside. When you're modeling, the first question you want to answer for yourself is, what do I want to be able to do? All right, so I'm listening for the doing. What is it this person is able to do? So that's somebody else. What else? We'll make some more points here. Yes, and why?
I'm a good entertainer.
Oh, right. Why? See if I can actually handle this.
I am a good entertainer. I'm probably like you, know how to make people comfortable in my house and enjoying their times with me.
Okay, so you're a good entertainer.
Entertainer, not on the stage.
But, and all right, in the sense of being when people are in your home, what's their experience? What happens when people are in your home?
I mean, they feel comfortable, they
Mhm.
feel happy, they feel relaxed,
Yeah,
they
yeah.
feel they want to come back.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
They want to be with me most of, the time.
Gotcha. Okay, good. All right. Somebody else. Paul? Yeah, yeah. We're just leaving it on.
Okay. I'm good at acting, and what that encompasses is very close to modeling. Character study. For example, out of a script, a person whom I would be acting as, I would need to, it's the Stanislavski method, I would need to know about that person or fabricate what that person's younger life would be, what the older life would be for the time frame of the acting period, and also during the time frame of the acting period.
Mm-hmm.
And along with that, want to put in there performing arts with physical agility, such as downhill skiing, competitive sport like fencing. So I have all of those good qualities and abilities.
All right. So now let me ask you all. Do you know what Paul is good at? Me too. Me too. So what would you ask Paul? What is it you want to find out? Well, now wait. Now help. You gotta help him out, Anwar. Gotta help him out. That's a pretty big question. Yeah, yeah. Now he's just been taught. We know that within the realm of acting, there's certain things that he has the ability to do, and within the realm of sports, is that right? Physical
Sports or
performance.
It's requiring physical dexterity, particularly with the coordination between vision, legs, and hands, arms, fingers.
Does this include acting?
This would include acting.
Does this
However,
include
not
driving?
in the sports aspect, it's not acting. It's
Yeah, I understand that.
okay.
Does this include driving?
It could, yes, it could include driving.
Mm-hmm. All right. So we're getting a little closer now to what his ability is. So we know it's something that goes across different contexts, right? It goes
Yes.
across sports. It could be in acting. It could be driving. Art. How about representational art?
No, not so much in that area. The arts form comes out in my body language as the person that I would personify.
Okay. So one way to do this is now to feed back to him our understanding of what it is he does. And as a opportunity for him to have something to respond to. All right? And then he can tell us we're wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. All right? So, Paul, so is it then that what you're good at is in any situation that involves expressing or using your body, your whole body, that you are good at coordinating those movements. Well, let me just leave it there. Good at coordinating those movements.
Yes, I would say that is correct.
Is there more to be said about it than that?
Well, possibly a little bit more. In the way of, even in the way of skiing, it's sort of personifying another person. I watch and see and then do practically the same, or as close to the same. Or I learned to do that.
So now it's coming together, right? So what does he have what does it sound like he has the ability to do? to watch somebody else engage in some kind of physical performance of some kind
Yes,
and put it in his own body and then reproduce it.
yes,
Is that right?
right.
Then that's the ability he has.
Yes. There's also another ability which is very similar, and this is a learned ability through schooling and education. It's a method of acting based on reading the entire play, book, whatever, and taking the person that I would be acting as, okay, and identifying in the book, script, whatever, this character as to how they would act. For example, an 80-year-old man would talk a little bit different than I talk right now. An 80-year-old man might talk a little crackle and a little on the weaker side and things like that. He wouldn't talk bold and strong. So in reading the person, in reading this book, I would have to pick out all of these things about the person and determine how they would actually even think. And as I mentioned, even before the time frame that they're in and after the time frame that they're in. And then
Gotcha.
also respond to other people in that same fashion.
Gotcha. Okay, got it. Somebody else then. Yeah. So Shireen.
Okay, I'm good at helping a child adapt to a different culture in education.
Now, I want to point out something that just happened. So when Shireen described what she's good at doing, you heard in the group several people go, oh, that's good. I just want to point that out, that these things that may seem pedestrian to you, you take for granted because it's just what you do, they don't seem very important or meaningful to you, like, being able to have people feel comfortable in your home. I just do that. To somebody who has need of that, who can't do that, that's gold. That's something absolutely wonderful they would love to have access to. So, all right, so children coming from a different culture
That's right.
into the culture you're in, you have the ability to help them adapt to it?
Adapt to it, yes. Children who actually didn't have a choice were thrown into a culture and who manifest some kind of anger, physical anger or internal anger, and just don't know how to cope with the situation.
Good, all right, got it. Okay, somebody else. I want to hear some more here. That mic back there? Mike.
I'm pretty good at troubleshooting across contexts.
Well, I don't
Go
believe you,
ahead.
Mike. So give me an example.
Okay. Most of my training has been in troubleshooting electronics, problems with electronics, problems with computer programs, but I also seem to have an aptitude for troubleshooting like mechanical problems with cars or even things like relationship problems between people.
Okay, now, what do you mean by troubleshooting?
Troubleshooting is in somebody says, I have a problem, and I would like a solution.
So you
then
are
the
adept at identifying.
finding the cause or the root of a problem.
And then, is that it then? You're good at identifying the cause or root? That's okay if that's it.
Yeah,
I
that's
just wanna
that's
know.
the majority of it. Many times
Mhm.
I'll also be able to suggest some sort of solution, but it may not be an optimal solution.
Is it the case that even if you are in a situation that, in a sense, is usually outside of your expertise, you can still identify what a probable cause, even though you might not have any idea what to do about it?
Yes, yeah. And as a matter of fact, I found that sometimes is advantageous because if people are looking at something from within their own bubble of experience, sometimes they're blinded by their experience and they're
Yeah.
not able to see outside of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. All right. Got a troubleshooter, a cross-contextual troubleshooter. Right. We have a paladin, the paladin of problems. All right. Somebody else. Yes, Rachel? You're good at tattooing. All right, now, so she's good at tattooing. Do we know what she's good at?
No.
I don't quite know. What does that mean, good at tattooing?
Well, that
So-
actually is a very big thing for me. I'm good with my clients and making them feel at ease before I start working
Okay,
on
now
them.
there's something, right? Good at making, because I'm sure that a lot of folks, when they come in and the needle starts buzzing. You're like, oh, wait a minute. Did I really want that? Okay, so you're good at making people feel comfortable, did you say? Uh-huh. At ease, thank you.
I don't know.
At ease. Uh-huh. And is that what you meant when you said you're good at tattooing?
That's part of it. I'm good at that. I'm good at, actually before that, helping them figure out what it is they want and why, and making sure that this tattoo and the placement of it's going to be a good choice. And then after 13 years of doing it, I think I'm also pretty good at the application of tattooing.
What do you mean good at the application?
Of doing the actual tattoo.
I mean, so that
They don't get a
there's not
little
lot
stick
of,
drawing.
you don't get a lot of, oops,
Yeah, not,
oops.
actually I do that, but I do it on purpose. It's just fun.
How do you spell mother?
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Uh-huh. So there's three abilities, at least, that we could model from Rachel. You know, if we were interested in doing tattooing, there's three abilities. There's the ability to help somebody identify what and where to put a tattoo in such a way that it's something that is congruent with who they are and what they'll really want. Yeah. Good at making somebody feel at ease with the process. And then good at actually applying the tattoo. All right? So those are at least three abilities. Now, so one of the important things we just did was we chunked this down into three separate abilities that we can more easily get our arms around. Now, the next question I have is, do we want to model all three of those? Well, not all at once. For sure, we would do them. I would do them sequentially. But do we want to model all of them? It depends on what? Well, it depends. Okay. All right, I had difficulty arguing with that. However, I will find a way. Well, now, let's take Anwar, for example. Suppose Anwar wants to learn to do tattooing.
Maybe I'm not going to do tattooing per se, but I like exercise to make people, what did you say?
He's
That applies to me.
okay. Now wait a minute, Anwar. Wait.
Okay.
Do you need to learn how to make people feel at ease?
Personally, no, because
No, personally, no. You have that ability. That's why I picked on you. Because let's say, you had an epiphany this afternoon and you went, I could have been a tattoo artist. That's my calling. I must be a tattoo artist. Rachel knows how to do this. I want to become a tattoo artist. I'm going to model her, all right? Now I know. Wait. Yeah, we'll get it. Yeah. Okay, down, girl, down. Okay. You're helping me make a point. All right. So we know that Rachel, that there are at least three kind of sub-abilities that together make it possible for her to be a good tattoo artist. She has the ability to help people identify what and where to put a tattoo in a way that pleases them or will please them through time. She has a way to make them feel at ease. And she's good at actually applying the tattoos. Yeah? Now, if Anwar wants to become a tattoo artist, does she necessarily need to model all three of those? And my answer is no. That what she wants to model and needs to model are those abilities that she herself does not already have. She doesn't have the ability to know how to interact with somebody and help them figure out where tattoos go. That's something she needs to find out. She also needs to find out about how to apply tattoos in a way that, you know, it's artistic and good. I don't know what to say about tattoos. I never had it done, but so it's inky and in the right place. But the ability to make somebody feel at ease is something she's already got. And so she doesn't necessarily then have to model out. That's one of the virtues of talking with somebody and finding out just how is it, you know, what are the sub-abilities that go together, that come together to make up this whole ability this person has. Because perhaps I don't need it all. Perhaps there's just one piece that I need. There's one piece I need. So that's one point I wanted to make from this. All right. Now, another point I want to make is it kind of goes the other direction. So Rachel says, I have the ability to help people figure out where to put a tattoo and what to select for a tattoo in a way that, you know, they're happy with their tattoo. Now, if we wanted to do tattoos, we certainly would want to know how to do that. But another thing we can do is think about, well, is there someplace else in human experience that we could apply that ability? Where else could that ability be applied outside of tattooing? Any ideas? Jim? Plastic surgery. All right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Plastic surgery. Yes?
I would have to ask a question of Rachel before I can qualify what I think she could apply it.
No, you just do it to me. It's okay. Go ahead and do it. What is it?
Question?
No, just tell, what is it you think? Where,
What is it I think?
yeah, it could be applied.
Artistic ability to be able to paint, to draw, to create art that people could appreciate on canvas versus on bodies, or other type of.
What do you guys think about that as an application of this ability?
That seems to be part of what she does, but it's not the... Yes, I am. Thank you for listening. No, I'm thinking of the visual spatial skill that is involved in doing... Sorry,
Oh.
visual spatial skill involved in doing a leaf or...
Now wait, no, we're talking
I
about
presupposing again?
we're talking about choosing, helping somebody choose
Yes.
what to put on their body and where.
That's why I'm saying this, what I think Paul said is only part of that, because in order to help somebody choose and put it where it is, would seem to me, I'm presupposing again,
Go ahead.
you're using space. The space is the body, and you're using her skill. There's a skill involved. I don't know how
Yeah, yeah,
or what, but
yeah,
there's a positioning and there's a space,
Right.
and there's the other part of it, which is the congruence for the person about where and how and what.
There is the congruence with the person about,
For the person.
yeah, not for,
And with.
with,
Ah, okay.
with. You
Right.
see, that to me is the essential piece that
Right.
is missing. That Rachel doesn't decide for people what they're going to have and where they're going to put it. It's an interaction she has with them. And through that interaction, she helps them come to what belongs on their body and where. Okay? So if I'm going to apply this ability to some other context, I would want to be thinking of other contexts that have that same structure. The art context to me does not, because it's not an interaction with somebody else. But now a makeup artist, the plastic surgeon, interior design person, somebody helping design a garden, or an architect, or a therapist working with somebody to figure out, you know, what do you want in your life, change you want in your life. Those are all contexts that have the same kind of structure to them as what Rachel's talking about. And so one of the things that, you know, perks up my, or grabs my attention is that I suspect that whatever structure we would find out that was operating in her that allowed her to figure out what fits for this person is a structure that could be applied in other contexts as well. All right? So I want you to be thinking about that, because one of the wonderful things about modeling that you will discover is that while we'll start with finding, okay, I want to do that, who do I know that can do that specific thing, now I'm going to get that model, is to take the next step and go, what are the interesting structures that are out there that I could model? And, you know, structures that could be applied across all kinds of contexts. That's when it goes from being kind of remedial and specific to being generative. And I hope that we'll get to do some of that before this weekend's over. All right. Now, I didn't talk with everybody in here, but does everybody in here know something, at least one thing you do that you do well, that you think, you know, I'm really good at that? Any? Oh, Jim's still thinking. What do you think, Jim? Because you have to have it for us to proceed. Now, so one of the ways to... Oh.
I have the ability to get interested in people.
Oh. How do you know that? What indicates or suggests to you that you have the ability to get interested in people?
Because I feel more alive and curious and excited or intrigued, and I see a response in the other person that tells me that there's something interesting happening for them because of my interest.
Mm-hmm.
They're experiencing something about themselves.
What kind of response? Like running, screaming in the other direction? Well, that's a response.
Yeah, right. No, it's more of...
It's more of...
it's more of...
It's a lot more of...
backing up. No. It's... I think their eyes light up. There's sort of a sense of excitement, a sense of engagement.
I'm convinced. I believe you. Good. All right, so you got it. All right, so everybody's got something, right? Now this. Let's start finding out how to figure out what the structure is that's operating inside of each of us. So to do that, I need to have somebody come up and help me. Shireen, would you do that? Would you come up here? That's your chair.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. All right. Yeah. Everybody sneeze, cough. Whatever you're going to do now. What are you guys doing over there? Okay, great. All right, so here we have an exemplar of an ability. You have the ability to help, I'll butcher it now and then you can correct me.
Okay.
So you have the ability to help children from other cultures make the transition into the culture that they've been thrust into.
That's right.
And they're not happy about it.
Not at all.
Not at all.
Mm-hmm.
But you do have the ability to help them make the transition.
Yes, adapt.
Adapt, that was the word, adapt.
Adapt and make the situation somewhat acceptable.
Well, that was my next question. What do you mean by adapt?
Well, to make the situation, acceptable in their own little world.
Mm-hmm. Acceptable
Because-
in their own little world. That's great. So we've already begun, by the way. So now one of the things you want to keep in mind in doing modeling is that people are never not being themselves. That is, people are always manifesting who they are. Okay. Now, so tell us, how do you do that? Just tell us how you do it.
Well, the first thing I do is I find out about the culture that from where the child belongs. So I find out what language they speak, and if they've been into another system of education, and if they've got siblings, and if they have been in another system of education, if they've had any problems in that particular education. And I also question the parents to find out if their reaction within the context of school is the same as at home, which helps me to sort of get an idea of what's going on externally to the child. Then afterwards, I have to assess the child within the educational system. So I have sort of like, not really an interview, but I have a moment with the child where I just observe the child, see how that little person will react to different things. So I give them the choice of different activities within the room. So it could be physical activities, it could be taking a book and looking at a book, whatever the child wants to do. And if the child doesn't do anything, then I start interacting with the child. So by asking questions, very often one of the problems is that I might have a child that doesn't speak English at all. And I might not necessarily speak the child's language. So I have to use a lot of body language. And if the child still doesn't react, I just basically make a clown of myself. I just want the child to have some sort of reaction so I can see and maybe perceive how I can deal with this.
Okay, now I'm going to interrupt. All right. So we could let Shireen go on, right? Till we have to get to another tape, and she can go on. She'll go on and on and on. And I don't know if you were getting down everything that she said. It was a lot, and she was just getting rolling. All right, it was a lot. Now, how are we going to get our arms around all that? How are we going to capture that? Do we want to get down everything that she's talking about, everything she's describing? And my answer is, I don't think so. Because as she was describing what she does, I was hearing a lot of redundancy. That is, that I was hearing and perceiving certain patterns that she was operating again and again. They were manifest or expressed in different ways. They came out in different forms, but it was the same underlying pattern. If we're modeling, what we're after is this underlying structure that gives rise to all of that surface manifestation. We don't want to get the whole surface. We don't want to become Shireen. First of all, we can't. I don't care how much modeling you do. I don't care how many notes you take. You cannot become Shireen because you will never have her body, her personal history, and all of the millions and millions of little learnings and connections that come together to be her in this situation. And we don't want that anyway. We already got a Shireen. We don't want another one. We don't. The world has a Shireen. What we want is Rachel to be able to manifest the same ability that Shireen has, but manifest it the way Rachel would. Manifest that ability the way Rachel would. Or Jim manifest, the same ability that Shireen has, but the way Jim would. I want Jim to bring Jimness to helping a child adapt to a new culture. I want Rachel to bring Rachelness to helping a child adapt to a new culture. Do you guys understand? The goal in modeling is not to duplicate the exemplar. The goal is to elicit and make operating in you the structure so that you can hang who you are on that structure. You can manifest who you are through that structure. Okay? So that's what we're after. Now, so one of the things for us to be listening for, paying attention to at this point, one of the things we will be paying attention to and listening for are, the underlying similarities or patterns in the things that she's describing for us. So I got a little example here on the board. Suppose we have this person who says, we've got one person saying these things. You work hard and you'll get there. And this person also says, show me someone waiting and I'll show you someone going nowhere. And you've got this other person saying, I make my successes. And you've got this same person saying, he just doesn't try, so he doesn't know what he's capable of. Are these 4 different sentences? Yes. Are they saying different things? No. The structure, what's giving rise to all of these, to me, is the same thing again and again. Here is somebody who makes a connection between working and succeeding. If you work, you'll succeed. And these are all different expressions of that same underlying structure. Do you guys follow me? If we talk with this guy, call him Joe, we talk with Joe from now until doomsday, we will hear that same connection between work and success come up in thousands and thousands of different ways in him expressing himself and talking about the world. We don't want to have to record all of these different ways of expressing himself. Life's too short and they're not that useful. What we'd rather do is identify what is the underlying structure, take on that structure, and then produce our own surface manifestations of it, our own ways of expressing that. Do you guys follow me on this? Okay, any questions about that? It's a fundamental idea that we need to have here. Okay, so here we've got Shireen. I'm so glad not to be up here alone. I hate being up here alone. So here we have Shireen. She's got this wonderful ability. We would like to understand how she does that in terms of what's going on in the structure of her experience. Now, Shireen, it's not her job to know. Her job is to be Shireen. It's our job to pull out of her Shireenness, the structure that is making that possible. So she's just going to talk about her experience, and it's just going to come out, this tidal wave of stuff is going to come out, right? What do we do in order to bring some structure to that? Well, in order to make sense out of it, to get our arms around what she does, we need distinctions. We need distinctions. We need to have a certain set of things that we are paying attention to or looking for in experience while we're ignoring others. So, for instance, if we were modeling Shireen, and one set of distinctions we could use would be dressing, how she dresses. And so we say, well, listen, when you're helping a child adapt to a new culture, how do you dress? Find out what kind of clothes she's wearing. And then we could wear those same clothes. Could we do that? Yes, we can. Absolutely we can. Will it work? Probably not. Probably not. But that is a set of distinctions of what she wears. Okay? We could also make distinctions, say, for instance, about how she breathes. So when you're with a child and you're helping them adapt, well, how are you breathing? What are your patterns of breathing? Mm-hmm.
You want to search for a distinction in the structure?
Well, you're asking, do I want to search for a distinction in the structure?
Yeah.
I'm saying we need to first identify our distinctions and then apply those distinctions to her descriptions. So it's like she's just going to start talking. Blah, 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 this is what I do, right? What do we pay attention to? That's the question. What do we want to have jump out at us as being meaningful? and the rest stay in the background. We don't want everything in the foreground. We only want in the foreground those things those distinctions that seem to us to be important for manifesting this ability. We can make distinctions, whole distinctions about what she's wearing. Okay, what do you wear? We want to pay attention to what she wears. But is that a useful distinction? Probably not. So we're not going to hold that. We don't care about that. What do we care about? What are we going to pay attention to as she describes her experience? So here's what I'm going to suggest we're going to pay attention to for these. This is what we're going to pay attention to for these 3 days. You have in your handouts something called the experiential array. And what the experiential array is a format for capturing the set of distinctions that I think are essential to pay attention to when you're modeling somebody. The belief template, what it captures is what your exemplar's external behaviors are, what your exemplar's emotions are, their strategies, and their beliefs. It seems to me that those are the 4 kind of realms of experience that we definitely want to be pulling out. We want to be pulling out of this person's experience. That is, what do they believe? How do they think? How do they feel? And what do they do on the outside? So this thing we call the belief template, the experiential array, is a way for us to keep track of information. How this came to be was a colleague of mine, Graham, and I were doing a training many years ago. It was the end of a practitioner training, and people were, people were going around. They were testing. It was testing weekend, so everybody was working, doing therapy with each other, and they'd go and gather information. And then we go and ask them, well, what did you find out about this person? What's going on with this person? And they would start reading to us page after page of notes. Page after page of notes. Well, they said this, and 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 this went on for pages. And what became clear to us was that 2 things. One was people didn't recognize redundancy. They didn't recognize that they had the same thing over and over again, just in different words. And the other thing that was happening was they didn't know what they had. In other words, they didn't have any way to separate or identify what's strategies or what's beliefs or what's emotions. It was all just mushed together. So we stayed up till 3 o'clock in the morning and created this thing, and it has survived ever since. The virtue of the array is just that it says, look, when you're gathering information from somebody, you want to make sure that you have identified these 4 different things. What are their beliefs? What are their strategies? What are their emotions? And what are their external behaviors? By having places to put those, as you gather information, it alerts you to assess, all right, what did I just find out? Did I just find out something about their behavior, or about their emotions, or their strategies, or beliefs? And whatever it is, you know where to put it. Oh, that's strategy. That goes there. Now you know that it's there. That also helps you avoid redundancy. Now, because you've identified this piece of strategy, for instance, now when you hear it again, and you go back to that strategy box, you can see, oh, I've already got that. I've already identified that. So at one level, what's useful about the array is that it simply gives you a place to put the information you found and divides it up into these large categories. All right? Any questions about that? You guys with me on that? Does that seem like a useful thing to do? It is. I'm not saying you need to, spend the rest of your lives using the array. For this weekend, we will. I recommend using it for some time into the future until you don't need it anymore. That is, until your understandings and intuitions make it possible for you to, in a sense, hold the array inside of you rather than having to identify it out on a piece of paper. Okay, so what we are going to be doing is we're going to be using this array, using this format as our basis for gathering information. The primary distinctions, the first level of distinctions that we're going to be using is, as we're listening to Shireen describe her experience, what we're going to be paying attention to is what is she believing, what are her strategies, what are her emotions, and what is their external behavior. All right? In a moment after the break, when we come back, we're going to start going into one of these. We're going to go into this box here, and we're going to identify some other distinctions inside of that. And we'll start actually gathering information. Okay? Let's take a break. Yeah. When do